On a chilly autumn morning in the small town of Fairview, North Carolina, Ethan Parker sat on a wooden bench outside the coffee shop, staring at the steam rising from his cup. His eyes were tired, and his once vibrant demeanor had dimmed over the past year. Life hadn't exactly been kind to him lately. At 38, Ethan had lost his job, gone through a painful divorce, and was now facing the looming foreclosure of the house he'd once called home. He had always believed himself to be strong, pragmatic, realistic, grounded. But as the weeks passed and hope seemed to grow fainter, that strength felt more like stubbornness. Negativity had crept in like a shadow, and each day felt heavier than the last. He didn't realize how deeply he had sunk into the depths of despair until the day he met an old man named Walter Harris. Walter was in his late 70s, spry for his age, with a warm smile and a presence that somehow lit up the grayest corner of any room. That day, Walter sat beside Ethan on the bench, sipping tea with a calmness that contrasted Ethan's stormy thoughts. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, son," Walter said with a chuckle, glancing sideways at Ethan. Ethan forced a smile. "You could say that." Walter introduced himself, and soon they fell into a slow but meaningful conversation. Ethan told Walter a brief version of his troubles, not expecting anything in return. But Walter just nodded, his face lined not just by age but wisdom. "Have you ever heard of the power of positive thinking?" Walter asked gently. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I've heard people talk about it like it's some kind of magic trick. Think happy thoughts and poof, life gets better. Doesn't sound realistic to me." Walter laughed, not mockingly, but with an understanding that only life experience could bring. "It's not magic. And it doesn't mean you pretend problems don't exist. It means you decide that problems don't define you." Ethan was quiet, absorbing that. Walter leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "Let me tell you a story," he began. "Years ago, I was a broke high school teacher, living paycheck to paycheck with 3 kids and a wife who had just been diagnosed with cancer. It felt like the walls were closing in, and I was angry at the world. I kept thinking, why me? But one day, I stumbled across a book by Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. Didn't fix everything, but it changed me. I started seeing what I had instead of what I'd lost. I started speaking positively even when things were bleak. Became hopeful. And that hope gave me strength I didn't know I had." Ethan listened intently as Walter told him how he eventually found new ways to earn extra money, how his wife survived cancer, and how his children had all grown up to live fulfilling lives. Walter credited it not just to circumstance or luck, but to choosing, every single day, to believe something good could happen. Over the next few days, Ethan kept running into Walter. Sometimes at the cafe, other times at the park or the library. Each time they spoke more. And slowly Walter's words began to stick. Ethan didn't suddenly win the lottery. He didn't magically get his job back. But something did start to change him. He began waking up with a different kind of energy. He set small goals for himself each day. Go for a walk, polish up his resume, reach out to 3 new employers, write in a gratitude journal. It felt silly at first, writing "I'm thankful for the sunshine" or "I still have my health." But as the days went on, Ethan realized those little things were adding up. He was no longer focusing only on the void but on the possibility. He applied for jobs with a new mindset. During interviews, his energy was different. He wasn't just another desperate candidate. He was optimistic, forward-thinking, and confident. That shift was noticeable. 3 weeks later, he got hired by a small logistics company looking for someone with management experience. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Ethan accepted it with genuine gratitude. He moved into a modest apartment and began building from scratch. Walter remained a part of his life, always offering nuggets of wisdom over coffee. But Ethan's own confidence began to grow. He signed up for a local leadership seminar, volunteered at a community shelter on weekends, and slowly started reconnecting with his daughter Lily, who had kept her distance during the divorce. Ethan wasn't perfect. There were still bad days, days he doubted himself, But something in him had shifted. That old voice that said, "Why me?" had been replaced with one that asked, "What's next?" About a year later, Ethan stood on the same street corner where he'd once sat in defeat. He was now managing a small team at work, saving money, and starting a podcast called Reframe Your Life, inspired by Walter and all he had learned about the power of mindset. He invited Walter to be his first guest. They sat in a cozy studio, sipping tea with microphones in front of them. Ethan leaned forward. "Walter, do you think everyone can change their life just by thinking positively?" Walter smiled. "No, but I believe everyone can start changing it that way. Positive thinking isn't the whole journey. It's the first step, a decision, a belief that no matter what you're going through, there is still light ahead." The episode went viral in their small town. Messages flooded in from people who felt inspired, seen, and hopeful. People from all walks of life, single moms, students, veterans, entrepreneurs, shared how they too were starting to believe that change was possible. One message came from a woman named Rachel, a recent widow who'd lost her husband to cancer. She had been sinking into despair, barely able to get out of bed. But after listening to Ethan's podcast, she started writing down one positive thought every morning. "It doesn't fix everything," she wrote, "but it reminds me that I'm still alive. And that counts for something." Ethan replied to every message personally. He didn't pretend to be a guru. He was just someone who'd seen the other side of hopelessness and chosen to believe in better days. Years passed. Ethan's podcast grew nationally. He was invited to speak at schools, businesses, even TEDx events. His message was always the same. Positive thinking won't make you invincible, but it will make you unstoppable. He wrote a book simply titled Start with Hope, which included his journey and stories from others who had transformed their lives through the power of mindset. The proceeds went to support mental health initiatives across the country. But no matter how far he went or how big his platform became, Ethan always kept a photo of the bench where he first met Walter. And every year, on that same chilly autumn day, he returned to that spot. Sometimes Walter joined him. Sometimes he didn't. But Ethan never forgot what Walter told him. You can't always choose your circumstances, but you can choose your response. And that response can change everything. One particularly rainy afternoon, years after their first encounter, Ethan got a letter in the mail. It was from Walter's daughter. Walter had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The letter said he'd kept a photo of Ethan in his wallet with the words, "This man reminded me why I believed." Ethan sat quietly, tears welling in his eyes. He walked to the old bench, now worn by time, and sat down. Pulling out a notepad, he wrote his next podcast episode, a tribute to Walter Harris and the seed he had planted in a stranger's life.